So hello friends, and as we have been doing this series of lecture that is called Alphabets of Ethics. Like today is the 13th lecture, and today we will be discussing things that are in vogue. In vogue means terms which are basically in practice for that concurrent year. Okay, remember these type of questions comes only to authenticate this fact, this basic fact rather, कि UPSC is basically interested in any and everything that is related to concurrent discourse. Okay, so every year some terms comes which are in vogue, which are used a lot. Suppose this year pandemic, vaccination, vaccine nationalism and all the issues related to that. Okay, so in 2018 and 2019 there was a term which was very much in traction. It became like a slingshot between the judiciary and the executive, and that term was constitutional morality. Okay, and in 2018-19 it was in traction, and just to feel that in 2019 question 3A is related to that. That question is, what do you mean by constitutional morality and how does one hold constitutional morality? So see, every question in UPSC is, particularly in paper 4, has something to do with concurrent discourse. Okay, you even see this year's paper. Okay, the case studies also that related to financial management. You are the head of the budgetary committee, and how all these things are related basically to the fiscal deficit prioritization of welfare over the infrastructure development. Okay, so if we come to this particular topic, what do you mean by constitutional morality and how does one hold constitutional morality? Actually, starting in 2018, this term started to come a lot in Supreme Court decisions. All the constitutional benches of Supreme Court, constitutional benches are those benches in Supreme Court which deals with the constitutional matters. Okay, so all those benches started to in every judgment which has phenomenal consequences as far as the social milieu was concerned, they started to come up with a term that was constitutional morality. Okay, the decisions related to triple talaq, the decision related to Sabrimala, okay, the decision related to Article 25 and 26. Okay, in all those decisions they came up decisions related to data protection. Okay, Puttaswamy case. Okay, so in all those cases there was one common feature, that all the benches and all the judges in their judgment, whether written individually or written in a joint format, even in obiter dictum, like these are those portion of the judgment which are not written but they are only verbally told. The judges started to use this term constitutional morality, and most of the times executive started to feel rattled, because they thought that again, is it like the judiciary is again getting into its overreach arm? Okay, just like in 1973-76, because of the basic structure, remember basic structure case, Keshwanand Bharti, basic structure, is it that the higher judiciary is again getting into the judicial overreach or judicial activism? So like there was lots of institutional discourse and institutional discourse of a kind which could be termed as mudslinging. Okay, which could be called as mudslinging also between the executive and the judiciary. Okay, mudslinging again is a very tough word. We cannot use mudslinging, but it was like a lot in any and every platform wherever judiciary and executive came together, they used to discuss, they used to basically exchange barbs between themselves. So basically constitutional morality, actually Justice Kurian Joseph, who is now retired, Justice Kurian Joseph explained this term very nicely. He explained this term in an idea exchange that is conducted by Indian Express newspaper. He exchanged this term that constitutional morality is basically a metaphorical term, and since our constitution has best of religious aspects of every religion. So constitutional morality could only be understood in the context of a metaphorical or a allegorical format. Further down the discussion, he said that basically constitution or constitutionalism or any nation that is operated by a constitution where rule of law is sovereign, is basically interested in equality, liberty and dignity. Equality, liberty and dignity of each and every individual. Okay? When that equality, liberty and dignity of the individual is violated, maybe by executive, maybe by legislative, maybe by gram sarpanch, okay, or maybe by any public servant, civil servant, okay. So whenever equality, liberty or dignity, and here I am talking about the proverbial last man standing in the queue, as Gandhi's talisman used to say. Whenever equality, liberty and dignity of the individual is violated, then basically there are two rectificationary measures. One is legislative process, that is done by legislature in parliament or in legislative assembly by changing the law, by bringing in amendment, okay, or by constitutionality. This particular term becomes very important because based on constitutionality only, Kurien-Josephs explained that this particular rectificationary measure leads to higher judiciary getting into those type of decisions which could have been better dealt if there was a proper functioning executive. Okay, so it was a slight remark on executive as well and judiciary as well. So this constitutionality then leads to Supreme Court judges taking shield under this particular term constitutional morality to save the equality, liberty and dignity of the individual. Okay. Basically Article 25 and 26, that is part 3, increasingly those decisions which came on the basis of constitutional morality, increasingly those decisions, and still now those decisions are coming, and constitutional morality is like it remains in traction. Increasingly those decisions which came was related to part 3 of the constitution, that is fundamental right. And fundamental right, you know, like the prerogative of fundamental right depends upon the executive. The judiciary is only there to interpret, but judiciary started to interpret it in very, in inverted commas, very creative manner. Okay, so like for example Article 25-26, which basically led to Sabarimala discussion. Even now one case is running, a writ petition has been filed, a PIL has been filed rather, which is related to Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia's Dargah, because women are not allowed. Okay, so one law student has basically filed, female law student has filed a case. So Article 25 and 26, if you take that article in the context of constitutional morality, Article 25 and 26 says that any religion is free to profess, practice, propagate without creating any hassles in public order. So these 4 criteria are there. He can practice, he can profess, he can propagate, and without creating any disturbance in public order. But what about these things related to propagate? How do you basically interpret these things? Maybe what this, as it is alleged that Christian missionaries are associated with conversion of tribal people. Okay, so maybe things comes up to legislature brings in a law that is against conversion, as has been done by some of the states. Recently some of the states has also brought in that love jihad issues, and increasingly those cases are again landing into Supreme Court and High Court. Okay, so again I doubt, rather I say this with an informed guess, that again this constitutional morality would come into traction. Okay, then we come to some more terms. Gender sensitive counseling intervention. Actually this term has come up by some of the lower judiciary while giving small punishments on trivial matters to people. Gender sensitive counseling intervention. Actually what happened, this term I read few days back. Actually, one metropolitan magistrate, basically he gave a judgment where he said actually one person was accused of misbehaving with a woman. Okay, not molestation but misbehaving. So in that judgment he said that basically that person would not be getting into any punishment, but he would be getting into a gender sensitive counseling intervention where he would be taking admission into any voluntary NGO where he would be trained for his gender sensitivity. Okay, so gender sensitive counseling intervention, it could be used in police force at the lower level, because those people really need to have that gender sensitization. Because of that only some of the police stations are completely manned by women personnel. Okay, then we come to visual intelligence. Actually, visual intelligence is a type of is one of the aspect of increasing your emotional intelligence. Exactly, like just few days back I listened this term in Hindu, as well as I listened this term in TEDx, the TED talk. In that talk basically they said that this particular concept is to enhance your emotional intelligence, because what you do basically in visual intelligence, you basically imagine your success. Imagine how you would basically advance on your path to success, or how you would put in your endeavor. What are the things that can impede you or resist you in getting to your objective, and how you would deal with those things in a visual manner. You just like close your eyes and try to basically imagine those things. This is increasingly being used by sports psychologists, and even like doctors who get into major operation, complicated operation, they basically imagine, and they increase their calmness and they decrease their anxiety by this visual intelligence. So thank you very much for today's lecture, listening to today's lecture. Keep on sharing. Okay, thank you so much.